All right. So we'll go over the question, how do you gather requirements? So when somebody asks this question from the candidate's usual answer is, you sit in front of the user, you talk to him, you ask him various questions, you go prepared with a questionnaire, and then you ask him, all those questions, and you ask him the business rules, so he can go over a template. He might even say one can go over a questionnaire, or one can go over a template to gather the requirements, right? So kind of this is what comes to a person's mind. Meeting with the user, going over a questionnaire and asking those questions. Then there is a template of requirements, like template of BRD. I can take my BRD template with me, you know. But these are the only two things or three, four things that come to a person's mind. Other things are, when you are gathering requirements, there are certain attributes of the requirements. All right. Other things that come to my mind are attributes like clarity, completeness, and detailed requirements, things like that. I mean, but still we are again limited to the meeting. We are just talking about the meeting at present. More complete answer will look something like this. This is what impresses people. Let's go one by one over these things. See, before a meeting, an actual meeting with a person happens, there is a planning involved, right? Then there are some post meeting things involved. These are just my own jargon. There is nothing like, we are basically creating a methodology right here, okay? Something that you can use in the interviews, okay? So as part of planning, I will think about, I'm just going to give you easy way to remember all these things. Who, all, when. I'm writing in my own English language. When, who, with who all will I meet, when I will meet, like when will I meet this guy, when will I meet that guy. I'm just calling it when, so that just to remember there are multiple meetings that you're planning, right? What all will I discuss, right? Right? If you can remember these three, that should be, then where, you need to book something, right? And yeah, over web, over phone, okay? So medium, right?
Usually we can use the projector, with a slideshow.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, sometimes you have to show the users the scope of the project and some planning phases in the beginning so that they can prepare themselves mentally for the next coming meeting. Usually they don't have enough time to give you.
Yes.
So if you let them know in advance.
And before every meeting, there is gonna be a planning for that meeting. Then we need to make a big high-level plan about what all meetings do I want to conduct. So this box that I made below this planning for this meeting, actually this is wrong. Let me call this here. I would say there is a high-level plan involved which encompasses everything. And these are the attributes of that high-level plan. Right? These are the attributes of this high level plan. What do you say? Who all will I meet? When I will meet? I will basically give a kind of a timeline for various meetings and various participants and various agendas of those meetings, right?
Sure.
Right? Is it right? Just, I'm not saying you should have to come out with an agenda. You need to be able to find out the agenda. We are talking about clearing the interviews, talking about something that you can talk in the interviews. We are not talking about this is the complete methodology. I'm just trying to give you words which you can remember while talking to the interviewers. Okay? In this planning for every meeting, there are things involved which are related to that meeting. So you need to basically make sure, let's talk about that effort. Again, just apply your who, when, where all. Okay? You need to make sure wherever, okay, first of all, what you need to discuss. That's very important. Okay? So in that I can think of 2-3 things. One I can think of is issues. Okay? Okay,
Yes.
specific questions. Okay,
Yes.
drafts or deliverables. So this is what I can take with me when I go in such meeting. Okay, you're planning to deliver as a result of that meeting, I'm calling it as a draft of deliverable. There are drafts, right? You first make a draft of a deliverable, right? First draft, second draft, you know what that is?
Yes.
So yes, I'm just saying that if you say these things, it will at least look like you know something.
But I think it doesn't go to the post-meeting stuff,
Yes,
because
yes,
30 minutes of meetings, they cover everything. Like you can say in the meeting, okay, I'm going to send you the email, or whatever medium you will use, and you will send them the minutes of meeting and everything.
rough drafts of deliverable based on whatever I know.
Oh, I got you. So
At least
rough drafts of deliverable, like I can just print the,
total template itself.
Yeah,
It might be
just-
just a complete template itself.
or if I'm showing them a slideshow, I can just print the slides. Give
Ah,
them a
one more
handout.
thing.
Give them a handout.
Yes, yes. See, this could be one thing. This can presentation. I will prepare a presentation. Just say I will prepare a presentation. Nobody's asking you to prepare the presentation in the interviews right there. They just want to hear your ideas, whether you know it is involved. So these things you can say as part of planning for every meeting. Okay. Then one more thing. Instead of calling it meeting, we'll call it JAT session, JAR sessions. These are called as JR sessions, JAD sessions. Joint application review, joint application development, design. Yes, you're right. Right.
Yes.
So these are these. I'm just writing it here, but it doesn't mean it belongs here. I'm talking about these basically will belong somewhere here. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Post meeting stuff. Let's come out with some post meeting stuff. Can you think of some post meeting stuff?
First of all, minutes of.
If you can remember these points, and let's say you come across a question like where you have, which you are already prepared, how do you get the requirements? Like this question we are preparing so well. You get into the points. You know the points so well. Just make sure your points are very crystal clear to her, and she can clearly see how are you planning to gather the requirements. The interviewer, that is, she means interviewer. But if you do not know the answer, then you get into long and mumbo jumbo kind of answers.
Okay.
Okay, that is good. So one or two mumbo jumbo, one or two clear answers will be enough to get you out of the interview, get you successfully out of the interview. Okay, so yeah, some of the things that are the post meeting stuff are minutes of meeting, follow up of the meeting, open issues and action items. Okay, nobody's going to check, hey, you know what, follow up meeting and open issues are same thing. What do you mean by that? What is the difference? Nobody's going to do any kind of this kind of analysis. Okay, so you should mention as many points related to post meeting, but if you see there is a difference in mumbo jumbo, there is a difference in clear points.
Yes.
You know, so if you know the proper points, always mention this.
Okay.
And keep the answers terse and small and short and good. You know, so this will help. But if you do not know the answer, then you start mumbo jumbo thing. It will help. Okay. Okay. This is the high level planning, right? There are other things involved. When you're thinking about this, you need to keep in mind, while planning all your meetings, this whole planning effort comes under something called as methodology. This planning, meetings planning, then there are other things in the let's say she asks, what kind of things will go as part of the methodology for gathering requirements. You pick it from this thing itself, this whole diagram that is in front of you itself. See, I will pick, how I will answer this. See, one needs to have proper templates. I'm just reading from here. I will make sure that the all the requirements are gathered clearly, completely, and with proper details. I'll make sure that users, whenever they come to the meetings, I go with my plans. There is a methodology to make sure that the plans, the planning of the meetings is done properly, and the methodology should make sure that you know that 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 the meeting results, or by the one more thing, updated deliverables. Meeting results or the updated deliverables and all open issues are handled properly, and distributed to everybody properly. I mean, just something. It is coming right out of this thing only. The only thing is, whatever questions you ask, you have to change these wording to suit that question. But it will be similar ideas. It will be same idea. You just have to put it in the framework of a different sentence.
I got you.
Okay. Another important part of the whole requirement gathering planning is we planned these meetings, we planned the methodology, it also should have the scope, right? It can go as part of the methodology also. If you know all these words, you can make it part of any question. You can say, as part of methodology, I will also make sure that the methodology ensures that the scope is maintained, right? Scope doesn't get bigger, right? And right, I'm adding one more attribute of the requirements, that's priority. Okay, there are one more that is coming to my mind, priority and source of the rec. Who gave you this requirement? It is helpful sometimes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so this is one more point. So methodology, scope. Other things that I can think of is, how will you ensure that whenever there are changes in the requirements, they go through a proper channel so as to become a part of your final document. You see, final delivered product. You need to make sure that that the change control procedure is also highlighted in the requirement gathering. This is the whole methodology of requirement gathering. Methodology, I've written it as part of the planning. It is also, everything is part of methodology also. I mean, it's not like it's not a science. You need to use these words to compose answers for any kind of questions.
Okay, I have a question here.
So this is a good question actually. What kind of change control mechanisms you have put in place and things like that. So we'll go over that also. Okay, we'll go over that in a separate this thing. So write that question: user adoption and change control. Okay, these are the two things I'm going to touch with you. Okay, boss? Yeah. Other thing is, you should have, like, if nothing, then kind of templates as part of the whole planning of the whole requirement gathering phase. So this is a whole phase we are talking about, right? Requirement gathering phase is this from here to here, like all this what we are talking is a requirement gathering phase. Making sense? Okay, so there is a methodology a part of it. So I mean, you need to come out with, you need to become creative about what you say. That's it. That's what my whole point is. Okay, and you can use these words to answer any kind of question. Okay, methodology, scope, changes in requirements, templates. So templates, okay. Now, if you see this whole requirement gathering phase, it has to be aligned with the project. Project has multiple phases: project planning, project requirement gathering, project requirement, then designing, then developing, then testing, then this thing. You're talking about one phase. How will you go about planning for that phase, right? She asked a simple question about gathering requirements, like which involved this, but we went into this and this planning also. Okay, I'm saying you mention all this. She mentions requirement. Now you know this framework so well, you answer everything. Important points. Okay, then so before the requirement phase, there are other phases, right? Like planning, right? And after planning, after requirement gathering phase, we have multiple phases. First is development, right after this, right? we have testing. Testing. Then we have training. Then we have production rollout. Then we have maintenance.
What do you mean by production rollout?
Just the day of production rollout, you know how to roll it out, you know.
Yeah, the implementation of.
Yes. Let's say over a weekend you're basically rolling it out, right?
Yes.
So over that weekend the task involved will be different, the planning has to be very different. I'm just putting it as a separate phase.
Okay.
I mean, I don't need to do that, but I'm just putting it as a. Then
Maintenance, okay.
okay, so these are the typical cycles, right? We just talked about requirement gathering. So all these things have to be aligned. Sorry, requirement phase has to be aligned with project planning. So this whole project
Okay.
this whole project there are so many aspects to it.
Yeah.
Every project has a
Too big. Okay, I have a question here. Like you said, planning, requirement gathering is. We have covered some part of planning in requirement gathering, don't we?
yes, planning will be for everything.
Yes.
Whenever we have, for every meeting we have planning, for requirement phase we have planning, we have project planning. Okay, I'm not saying this is the best way of doing the software. I'm just trying to say how to talk in the interviews, what can come to your mind. She will not ask everything. She will not ask you, can you tell me a little bit about project? Then you say project planning and requirements, blah, blah. She will be asking about something. You make sure you enter the planning phase, you enter the actual phase, you answer something post phase. That way you can come up with answers which are more crisp. Okay. Goals and objectives. So I have come out with these are the points I've written about the project, whole project, the whole project. Okay, you can see it in this picture, the whole project. There could be other people, you know, who are the project management team, you know, the whole team,
Yeah.
resource planning. Okay,
Yeah.
how various resources required, right, project timelines. Okay, risks, assumptions, impacts, and dependencies. If there are some, if this project is dependent upon certain other projects, you see.
Yes.
So we are just writing, I'm just giving you ideas. You mention these points crisply, you can do a lot of, you can really win the heart of the interviewer. Let's say now somebody asks you this question, how do you gather requirements? We'll look at this diagram, come out with the ideas, and try to answer the same question in a more refined manner. We'll try to see how refined we can get by just using this diagram as an aid. Okay. See, well, requirement gathering is an important phase. There are multiple aspects to requirement. You know, they have to be clear, they have to be complete, they have to be detailed, and they have to be of high priority or medium priority. Anyway, we need to, you know, make sure that we have, you know, the requirements, proper documentation templates. We need to make sure that, you know, we document them properly. So, well, so to achieve these goals, we need to conduct meetings with the users. Now, every meeting involves planning. Okay. Now, as part of the planning for every meeting, we need to make sure, we take the right things with us. We make sure that we are at the right place. We make sure we meet with the right people, invite all the right parties involved in the requirement gathering. In that, I will call those as JAT sessions. So in the JAT session, we invite everybody, or JR sessions. Then we need to make sure to successfully have those requirement gathering meetings, which are key to gather good requirements. We need to have make sure that the results of meetings are distributed properly, the deliverables are updated and put on the common site, and distributed to everybody. Open issues and the action items are also sent to everybody. So as part of so we have this whole this is the kind of the requirement gathering, all about this is what requirement gathering is all about, as far as individual meetings are concerned. But then you cannot gather the requirements in one meeting. There are multiple business units you are interacting with. The requirements overlap. You need to make sure that you meet with everybody. So you need to have a full planning for the requirement gathering phase. If you want to gather the requirements properly, you need to have the planning for the whole phase. And as part of that, you need to make sure that you jot down all the JAT sessions that you're going to have with various people. Who are you going to meet? What are you going to discuss with them? What will be the agendas of those meetings, so that you can come up with a clear set of requirements for every business unit. Then we need to make sure that we book the right things. We need to make sure that the medium, or we want to have these meetings over the phone or the web or the conference or in a conference room and things like that. We need to have, as part of the requirements gathering phase planning, we need to have all these things jotted down quite clearly. Now, still at a high level, I think these things, all these requirement gathering phase, it has to be aligned with the whole planning effort for the whole project. Like, we need to make sure that the requirement gathering phase is aligned with the scope. Everything that we discuss has to be something that has been part of the project scope. Everything that we discuss, the deliverables that we make, the kind of points that we note, the open issues and the procedures that we follow have to be aligned with the project management methodology. Similarly, we need to make sure that we follow the templates. We need to follow all the processes. Everything that we discuss, everything that we come out with, if any new requirement we bump against a new requirement, we need to make sure that it is aligned with the goals and objectives of the project. There are other things to the requirement gathering, whole requirement gathering effort, which can be aligned with the resource planning of the project. I mean, we shouldn't be really thinking in terms. We should be allocating appropriate resources to all this. We should be keeping in mind the risks and assumptions of the project in mind. We need to make sure that the dependencies are met while gathering these meetings, because there are so many people involved in these meetings. We need to make sure that everybody's time is utilized. We don't bump against any risk and lose all this effort. Okay, there is not much relationship of requirement gathering phase with risks and all. I just want to make sure that project scope and methodology and the templates are the ones which have a lot of relationship with the requirement gathering phase. Okay, so you just mentioned that, but okay, so this is how I think this is all what goes into gathering the requirements properly. Let's touch on the various flavors of these questions. One thing is sure, just as somebody mentions requirements, this definitely comes into picture. What is the requirement methodology that you follow? Although methodology for us is a part of the planning and all that, but still you can use a similar things, not similar, exactly same ideas, just put it in a different line. Well, my methodology would consist of having a series of JAT sessions. Okay, my methodology will and I will be outlining very clearly what will be how many meetings I'm going to hold, how I'm going to make sure that the scope is maintained, what are the templates that I will be using, what are the changes, if the changes if the changes are introduced as part of those meetings, then how will I make sure that those changes take place properly, right? Then similarly, I will be, as part of the methodology, I'll be planning with whom I'm going to meet, when all I'm going to meet with all those people, what all meetings I'm going to hold, chat meetings I'm going to hold, I have to make sure that the logistics are, that is what it's all about, right? Phone and web, they're all about logistics, right? Then agendas are outlined properly. When for every meeting I will be outlining and part of the methodology, as part of the methodology, what kind of issues will be, you know, issues will be addressed, what kind of requirements requirements will be talked about, what all business users will be coming, so and so forth. And as part of the meeting, I will make sure that everybody has access to the business analyst, or I would use a template to get template of BRD to gather requirements, or a questionnaire to gather requirements. And then I will also make sure that the open issues and the update deliverables and the action items are sent out to everybody as part of my methodology. Everything is methodology now. I just eliminated this methodology word. I did not say this methodology word. Rest everything I said, because methodology cannot be part of methodology.
Okay.
Okay, boss?
Thank
In general, as you know, methodology is like the easiest way to understand it is like the systematic procedure that you will follow. Okay. In software world, we call it methodology, right? Okay.
Sessions.
One minute. You said that my methodology is to cover the scope of the project. I want to make sure that you make the right linkages. Okay. Methodology will ensure that the scope is made.
Okay.
You see, basically there's a scope, and then methodology will ensure that these things happen. That's the systematic procedure will ensure that these things get carried out, and these things get eventually happen. Like scope is maintained, requirements are gathered, changes are, whenever changes are made, they get into the requirements properly, they get plugged into the existing requirements properly. This is what a methodology or a systematic procedure will effect, will make happen.
Okay.
Similarly, systematic procedure will make sure that in each and every session right things happen. That's a systematic procedure, right? So you have to align every line like that. I have seen one guy making this thing. He was saying very clearly in the beginning. Okay, he was making a presentation of this thing, of this similar thing. As part of the planning of the requirements, I'll be addressing what all issues will be discussed. Rough drafts will be taken. I will make sure that I have the rough draft available and distributed before the meeting. I'll make sure that my presentation is ready and take it with me. Towards the end, he started speaking like this. Then there is post-meeting stuff, minutes of meeting, follow-up of the meeting, open issues and action items, updated and deliverables. That's it. He's not elaborating on the points. He's not making the proper relationship with the post-meeting of these points. So might be, it will contain, it will ensure, it will effect, it will make it happen. These are the relationships between these various points. Okay, you need to make sure that you use the right relationships. Okay.
Yeah, my methodology of gathering the requirements for this project will be definitely that I will make sure that this that we cover the scope of the project completely. Also, my methodology should be to ensure the changes in the requirements they are implemented in the projects. And in order to do that, basically when we will conduct these meetings, the jar sessions, stuff like that, there will be a pre-planning for all these meetings, and then to whom I'm going to talk, what's the main issues I'm going to talk about, where I'm going to talk, and what kind of medium I'm going to use. I'm going to talk to them over the phone, maybe a remote desktop session with them, maybe a PowerPoint presentation, and I have to choose that. And basically it varies with the responsibility of the end user. Like if it's a manager and he or she doesn't have time to come to my Jarger session, I'm going to do a remote desktop session with them to gather requirements from them. But on the other side, the same part of from the same team, if I have to talk to the sales rep, definitely 3 or 4 different people, they can give me different inputs on the same issue. How do they want to save a file? How do they want to extract the data from the database? Like what they want to see instantly on the screen while they are talking to the customer, or while they are listening to the customer is sitting in front of them, telling them these are her requirements.
You're not speaking with reference to the methodology right now. That you're putting good points, but I'm just waiting for you to say, according to my methodology, I will make sure that if there are conflicting requirements from different business units, how those will be resolved. This is what you want to say, right?
Okay. Yeah.
You're not aligning it with the methodology question.
Okay.
You got my point?
Uh-huh.
So please go ahead.
Okay. So, according to my methodology, I will make sure that all the requirements of different parts of my team, my input team, maybe the sales rep, maybe the project managers, like they don't conflict with the scope of my project, and they go well and align with the scope and timelines which I have to meet. And this will be my main methodology. And also, one big aspect of my methodology for the project will be that how I'm gonna implement these changes, how my end user is gonna give me the let me know that what are the changes they want, what else they want, and my methodology will be that how I'm gonna implement those changes in this project planning and implementation before the in this project planning phase before the implementation will happen. So my methodology will be to make sure that everything will be perfect within the scope of the project, and all the changes which are required by the end users, they are final before the implementation. That will be my methodology.
Good. Very good. This is clearly a flavor of the same question. I mean, you can clearly see how do you gather requirements, what methodology will you use to gather requirements, right? I mean, so let's cover some more questions like this. Can you think of some more questions to which the answer will be similar? How do you conduct jar sessions?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Right?
In other words, we just put jar session instead of meeting. That's it.
Okay, this is a good question. Any other thing, boss? What are the main components of a jar session? Same thing. You need to talk about this, then you need to take about this and this a little bit, then you talk about this. Sessions, various sessions. Briefly, in that case, just briefly touch this part. So your point, I will strongly suggest that you make sure the focus is maintained, and at the same time every part starts a little bit, because nothing is nonsense here. Okay, I mean, but you should touch it properly. You shouldn't just start saying, then you start elaborating on resource planning, how resource planning works, because resource planning is not the question. The question is, how do you conduct jar session? So you tell her about this is about conducting a jar session. Then you say that I have to make sure that whenever I'm conducting a jar session, it is aligned with the methodology and the scope of the project. The whole plan, the timeline has to be kept in mind. Make sure the right participants are invited. Make sure that the right templates are taken with me. You see my point? We are briefly touching them after elaborating these points. I didn't elaborate those points, assuming that you know how to elaborate that. But I touched briefly these points. So I gave an example of briefly touching. Okay, elaboration we have done so many times, so we know what elaboration means here. All right. So there are some more questions that are coming to my mind. Okay. What are the various risks involved in requirements, and how do you make sure that those risks are not? I mean, just something which you can get a lot of ideas right from this thing. Although it looks like more about risks, project risks. It looks like more about, see, main thing is, when we are gathering requirements, the risk occurs when main thing about project is cost, time, scope. Anything that will change any of these three things is a risk, right? Time. If you don't conduct these sessions properly, we are talking about problem with the time. If you don't conduct these sessions properly, you're talking about the cost also. If you don't conduct the session properly, they might give you some requirements which you don't want to implement, or originally they were not planned to be implemented.
Yes.
Scope. They can easily change the scope if you don't plan these meetings properly.
You can easily miss something.
You can easily miss something.
It will be a disaster.
That will mean time and cost. Actually, all three things basically work.
Definitely big disaster. Yeah.
Exactly.
Project will be out of scope.
You
know.
see, once you have this whole framework in your mind, little framework in your mind, you can pick the ideas right from this chapter again. See, risk occurs when you cannot maintain scope, time, and cost constraints of a project. Right? And that starts right at the planning phase, but it becomes magnified in the requirements gathering phase. In the requirement gathering phase, one has to make sure now in this case you will touch the meeting planning part little bit less, but the methodology for gathering requirements should ensure that the meetings are conducted successfully. Each and every meeting is taken place properly. The scope of the meeting, the scope of the discussion for the meeting have to keep the project scope in mind. The changes in the requirements have to be maintained properly. Each and every change has to be, see, I'm elaborating on this point now because this is directly aligned with your risks, right? So requirement gathering, high level things, I'm aligning with the risks. Right? You see, so it's a very interesting, what are the risks in a project and how do you manage risks? You can come up with a lot of ideas right from this thing. See, so this is a perfect example for a question which can be answered, which has nothing to do with requirements seemingly. Right? You say that now you are a BA, so you have covered the risks in the project pertaining to the requirement gathering phase. You can talk about these phases also if you know of any risk related to that. Briefly touch them with a warning, with a caveat, telling her, look ma'am, these are not my strong points, right? Development and all this, but I can tell you a little bit. Just little bit say, and don't even say disclaimer, just say, I know a little bit about the risk involved in development, testing and this thing. So in case of testing, easily they may not be testing the entire system. That is a big risk of every testing. Okay? They might stop testing without testing the entire system. So that's a big risk of testing. Training. The users might not be properly trained and they might get a shock on the first day or the first week of the deployment. This is the training risk. Production rollout. Everything is good. We have a great product, but it may not just roll out properly. That's a production rollout risk. Right? We might have an outage on that day. Right? We might have some weather problems. These are basic, but there could be bigger problems also. The systematic procedure to roll out the production system may not be carried out properly. Maintenance phase. Right? Maintenance phase has a big risk that sometimes if the maintenance phase is not, then the users become unhappy and their adoption goes down. They start dropping the system. They stop working on the system. They say, I don't want to work on this. This decreases my productivity instead of increasing my productivity. So these are some of the things, risks that come into a project. Now that you know so much about the risk, make sure that she asks you something about the project risks. How do you make sure those things? How will you we'll talk about that. But in case of this thing, just whenever you finish the answer to a question, bring it back to the risk and say there are so many risks involved in a project. Just try to end the answer like this. The natural thing of the interviewer is to ask them this question: what kind of risks? So you see, you need to make sure that you can read a lot from this diagram itself and come out with ideas. How do you make sure that the goals and objectives of the project are met properly in a project? See, well, there are multiple phases involved. I would say maintaining the goals and objectives and aligning everything with the goals and objectives is very important during the planning phase, project planning phase, during the requirement gathering phase, during the development, testing, training and production rollout and maintenance phases. But during requirement gathering phase, one needs to make sure that the scope of the requirement gathering is directly aligned with the goals and objectives. That's the most important thing, right? The whole methodology of the requirement gathering has to be aligned with the, what was I talking about this time? Goals and objectives of the project. You see, my whole point is, if she asks you anything about anything, anywhere, you can narrate the whole diagram, but with the proper orientation, with the proper touch. You cannot touch to something far off from the main discussion point with an elaborate manner, and you have to talk a lot about the current topic also. you can get a lot of stuff. So for example, in this case, because goals and objectives are involved, you can start talking about templates also. You can start talking about changes in the requirements again, because that will directly impact your goals and objectives. Is right?
Yes.
I have written these questions here. What are the project goals and objectives and how do you meet them? What are the risks in a project and how do you manage them? See, these questions are not at all similar to these,
Yes.
but we have come out with a big this thing, and we are now I would say we are in a position to answer many questions which are related to business analysis work, because business analysis at the end of the day is pretty much about holding these meetings and getting all that. Whatever is around that you can always touch,
Yes.
and whatever is around that we have logically connected that to even bigger picture called as project. Is it right? So my point is that there are many questions which can be answered using this whole framework. We'll get into the more detail, like what is the methodology for gathering requirements and gap analysis and designing, how does a BA work, and things like that. Then we'll work on other questions also, like user adoption and change control. But for related aspect is, how does a BA work? How does a BA gather requirements, then does the gap analysis, then makes the design documents and provides it to the development. So this whole diagram has to be completed. We'll complete it a little bit more in the next video.